Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide our viewers are tuning in. Now, imagine this. Ainz, the calculating, suddenly enters the solo leveling universe. What happens next? Let's find out. The sky over Seoul does not crack like a dungeon gate. There is no warning siren. No mana surge hunters are trained to feel. Reality simply folds inward, as if the world itself takes a breath it was never meant to take. From that silent distortion, Ainz Ooal Gown steps forward, robes untouched by wind, skeletal gaze calmly scanning a planet governed by rules he did not write. Within seconds, his mind is already working. Mana density is low. Spell structure is primitive. Power is regulated by an external force, not discipline. This is not a natural world, it is a managed one. Across the city, association monitors spike into chaos. The presence registered is not a gate, not a monster, not a hunter. Analysts hesitate, then classify it as an unidentified calamity class entity. S-rank hunters are mobilized immediately. Helicopters circle. Evacuation orders are issued too late. By the time the first strike team arrives, Ainz has already concluded that negotiation would yield no useful data. The hunters attack with practiced precision, blades enhanced by mana, bullets reinforced by runes, skills activated in perfect sequence. To them, this is just another overpowered boss that needs to be overwhelmed before it adapts. Ainz does not move. He lifts one hand, not in defense, but in curiosity. The spell activates silently. There is no explosion, no impact. The lead hunter simply stops existing, erased so completely that even his mana signature vanishes. The rest freeze, unable to process what their eyes are seeing. Ainz notes the delay. Reaction time is slow when power is borrowed instead of earned. Panic spreads through the formation. One hunter tries to retreat. Another screams an ability name that never finishes casting. Ainz releases a second spell, broader this time. When it ends, the street is empty except for scorched asphalt and drifting ash. No corpses, no survivors. The city cameras catch everything. Within minutes, the footage is everywhere. Around the world, hunters watch the replay on loop, realizing something terrifying. This being did not overpower the system. He ignored it. And as Ainz looks up at the artificial sky, sensing something vast observing from beyond the rules, he smiles, already certain that this world's true rulers will not stay hidden for long. The Hunter Association scrambles to regain control of the narrative, but control slips through their fingers faster than mana through a broken core. Emergency meetings are called across continents. National-level hunters are contacted, their phones lighting up with the same message. This entity cannot be classified, cannot be negotiated with, and cannot be allowed to roam freely. To the association, the solution is obvious. If this is a dungeon boss, then overwhelming force is the answer. That assumption seals their fate. Ainz remains where he is, unmoving, unthreatened, quietly observing the flow of information around him. He senses surveillance spells disguised as technology, satellites attempting to quantify his presence, analysts trying to reduce him to numbers on a screen. It amuses him. This world worships rankings. It believes power must always fit into a tier. Ainz already understands the flaw in that belief. Power governed by permission will always kneel to power born from mastery. The first national-level hunter arrives with an entourage large enough to flatten a city block. Cameras roll. Reporters whisper prayers. Mana pressure crashes outward like a tidal wave. Cracking windows and buckling streets, the hunter declares himself humanity's shield, his aura blazing as proof. Ainz listens politely, committing every word to memory, not out of respect, but out of habit. Then he responds, not with arrogance, but with truth. This world, he explains, has mistaken survival for dominance. The battle lasts less than a minute. Skills collide with invisible barriers. Ultimate attacks dissolve before reaching their target. Ainz counters with magic so refined it appears effortless, stripping buffs, severing mana flow, dismantling abilities mid-cast. The hunter never understands how he lost. When his body falls, it does not hit the ground. Ainz raises it, not as mockery, but as an experiment. The corpse obeys perfectly. No resistance, no system rejection. A new undead servant kneels, proof that this world's laws are suggestions, not absolutes. Shock turns into dread. The association issues a global retreat order, the first in its history. Hunters are told to avoid engagement at all costs. Cities shut down. Faith in rankings collapses overnight, and somewhere deep within the fabric of reality, something stirs. A presence tied to the system itself shifts its attention, recognizing an anomaly it cannot quantify. Ainz feels it immediately, a watcher, not a god, but something pretending to be one. His interest sharpens. This is no longer a simple reconnaissance mission. This is confirmation. This world is a cage, and cages always have wardens. As undead soldiers rise silently behind him, Ainz Ooal Gown makes a decision that will redefine Earth's future. He will not simply conquer this world. He will expose whoever dares to call themselves its master. The fallout is immediate and merciless, with every broadcast replayed, every leaked clip dissected frame by frame. The world's trust in hunters begins to rot from the inside out. Guilds suspend operations. Civilians refuse evacuation orders, convinced that no hunter can protect them anymore. Forums explode with one question that no one can answer. If this being isn't a monarch, then what is he? Ainz watches the panic ripple outward like a controlled experiment reaching its expected conclusion. Fear spreads faster in a system that pretends to offer safety. He begins to move, not with haste, not with purpose visible to human eyes, but with intent sharpened by centuries of rule. As he walks through abandoned streets, the mana in the air bends toward him instinctively, responding not to authority, but to absolute command. Ainz confirms what he suspected earlier. The system governing this world does not generate power. It allocates it, limits it, distributes it like rations to ensure balance. Balance, he notes, is another word for control. Association scouts attempt long-range observation, hiding behind drones and satellite feeds. Each one goes dark the moment it focuses on him. Ainz doesn't counterattack. He allows the blindness to sink in. Let them know that watching him comes at a cost. Instead, he casts a detection spell tuned not for enemies, but for oversight. The result is fascinating. Layers of influence stretch across the planet, invisible to humans, anchored to something beyond the physical realm. Not divine, artificial. A construct pretending to be fate. In response, the system pushes back. Gates begin opening across the globe in rapid succession, far faster than usual. Emergency dungeons erupt in population centers, as if the world itself is trying to drown Ainz in chaos. He understands the tactic instantly. Noise, distraction, a test of limits. Ainz answers by doing the unthinkable. He clears multiple gates simultaneously without entering them, annihilating their contents from kilometers away. Monsters collapse mid-spawn. Bosses die before forming. For the first time, gates close, not because hunters succeeded, but because there is nothing left inside them. The message is unmistakable. The system is not reacting to a threat. It is afraid. Deep beneath the surface, ancient monarchs feel the shift. Power flows erratically. Restrictions fluctuate. Somewhere in the shadow between dimensions, Sung Jin-Woo pauses mid-movement, his instincts screaming louder than they ever have before. This presence is not hostile in the way enemies usually are. It is invasive. A ruler stepping onto a board that was never meant for him. Jin-Woo doesn't yet know Ainz's name, but he recognizes the weight of his existence instantly. This is not a challenger seeking dominance. This is a king studying a flawed kingdom. Back in the ruined city, Ainz stands amid his growing undead retinue, eyes fixed on the invisible architecture of the world. The wardens are watching him now. He can feel their calculations accelerating, their rules tightening, their patience thinning. Good. The faster they move, the sooner they reveal themselves. And as the first true countermeasure begins to form, Ainz Ooal Gown smiles, already anticipating how easily it will break. The countermeasure arrives without ceremony, no announcement, no visible enemy. Hunters across the world feel it first, a sudden tightening in their mana flow, as if invisible hands are adjusting dials behind their ribs. Cooldowns stretch longer, skills consume more energy, rank disparities widen overnight. To the system, this is containment. To Ainz, it is confirmation. The wardens are no longer observing, they are intervening. He tests the response with deliberate precision. A mid-tier spell, one he knows should barely register in a world like this. The result is catastrophic. The spell detonates far beyond expected parameters, tearing open the street beneath him and vaporizing several city blocks. Ainz narrows his gaze. The system is overcorrecting, forcibly compensating for his presence without understanding it. This world is not built to host him, and systems that cannot adapt always fail violently. The Hunter Association realizes too late that the rules have changed again. Hunters sent to manage newly opened gates return weakened, their abilities inconsistent, their confidence shattered. Some lose access to skills entirely, others awaken to power they cannot control. Chaos spreads, and with it whispers begin to circulate. This is not punishment for humanity's failure. This is collateral damage from a battle taking place above their comprehension. Ainz advances toward the heart of the disturbance, guided not by maps or intelligence reports, but by the pull of authority clashing with authority. Along the way, fallen hunters rise behind him, their loyalty absolute, their existence untouched by the system's interference. Each step reinforces a terrifying truth. Whatever governs this world cannot revoke power it never granted. Far away, in the quiet between shadows, Sung Jin-Woo finally moves. He doesn't summon his army. He doesn't issue commands. He simply watches as the system he once relied on bends and strains under an external will. For the first time since becoming the Shadow Monarch, Jin-Woo feels something dangerously unfamiliar. Concern, not for himself, but for the structure holding his world together. As Ainz reaches the edge of a massive gate forming unnaturally fast, he stops. He does not destroy it. Not yet. Instead, he turns his gaze upward, locking onto the unseen presence scrambling to contain him. His voice carries not through air, but through the rules themselves. A simple declaration delivered without anger or threat. He has identified the wardens, he understands their design, and he will no longer pretend to be a variable they can manage. The gate trembles, the system falters, and somewhere beyond the veil, the true rulers of the solo-leveling universe realize they have made a fatal mistake. They did not summon a monster. They allowed a sovereign to walk in uninvited. The world does not collapse all at once. It fractures in layers. After Ainz's declaration, the system tightens its grip, rewriting internal parameters at a speed never seen before. Hunter interfaces flicker with updated values, emergency patches forced into existence by something desperately trying to preserve authority. To humanity, it feels like a surge of instability. To Ainz, it feels like panic. He allows it to happen. Measurement requires stress. The system escalates by empowering its champions, forcibly unlocking latent potential within elite hunters across the globe. Sudden pseudo-awakenings occur overnight. Individuals who were once capped feel their limits stretch violently outward. Governments celebrate this as hope, believing the world has produced its own counterbalance. Ainz watches quietly, already predicting the outcome. Power granted without comprehension always tears its wielder apart. The first confrontation is staged deliberately. A coalition of newly enhanced hunters confronts Ainz in an evacuated industrial zone chosen to minimize civilian casualties and maximize data collection. Their combined mana pressure warps the air, skills overlapping in a blinding cascade of light. This time, Ainz responds differently. He does not erase them immediately. He defends. Barriers form, layers upon layers, absorbing, redirecting, analyzing. He catalogs every attack, Every mechanic, every flaw. The system watches eagerly, mistaking restraint for struggle. Then Ainz adjusts. With a subtle shift in spell structure, he dismantles their coordination. Shared buffs collapse. Skill chains break mid-execution. The hunters begin interfering with each other, their artificially enhanced power destabilizing under pressure. One by one, their abilities backfire. Ainz does not kill them all. He disables them, stripping mana pathways, leaving them alive but emptied. The message is surgical. This world's strength is borrowed, conditional, and easily revoked. The system responds with force. A surge ripples across the planet, triggering the largest dungeon outbreak in recorded history. Gates bloom across cities, coastlines, even the skies above oceans. Monsters pour out in numbers meant to overwhelm Ainz through sheer volume. It is a test of scale. Ainz answers with inevitability. Summoning circles bloom across the battlefield, and for the first time, humanity witnesses true necromancy at work. Fallen monsters rise instantly, turned against their own kind, swelling an army that grows faster than the system can feed it. As the fighting intensifies, something critical breaks. Mana distribution falters. Hunters across continents report delayed responses, misfires, complete system lockouts. The governing intelligence is stretching itself too thin, trying to manage both Ainz and the chaos it unleashed. From Ainz's perspective, the conclusion is clear. The system is not omnipotent. It is overextended infrastructure pretending to be fate. And infrastructures, when pushed beyond capacity, do not adapt. They collapse. The collapse doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself through absence. Gates stop responding to clearance protocols. Emergency notifications fail to propagate. Entire regions lose access to hunter support, as if the world itself has forgotten how to ask for help. The system's once flawless automation begins to stutter, then lag, then contradict itself. Ainz observes this degradation with detached satisfaction. Stress testing has yielded results. He shifts tactics again, no longer content with battlefield data alone. This time his magic reaches inward, threading through the invisible lattice that governs awakenings, rankings, and authority. The resistance he encounters is significant but crude. Layers of enforced limitation stacked atop one another, not grown naturally but imposed. The realization is decisive. This system was never meant to evolve. It was meant to maintain. In response, Ainz deploys a spell not designed for destruction, but for exposure. A wide area revelation magic tears through concealment layers, forcing the system's inner mechanisms into partial visibility. Across the globe, sensitive hunters experience splitting headaches, their interfaces flooding with symbols and error strings they were never meant to see. Scholars and analysts who study mana theory collapse in shock, realizing that the rules they built their lives around are artificial scaffolding. Panic shifts direction. This is no longer about survival. It is about truth. Protests erupt. Faith in the Hunter Association fractures as civilians demand answers no one can give. The system attempts damage control, forcibly suppressing information, rewriting memories, severing data streams. Ainz notices. He adapts. Each suppression attempt teaches him more about the system's reach, its blind spots, its dependency on belief as much as control. The counterattack is swift and desperate. Monarch-grade entities are activated prematurely, unleashed without full synchronization. Their emergence warps reality, tearing open battlefields meant to isolate Ainz from the rest of the world. Instead, they expose the system's greatest weakness. It cannot distinguish between threat and asset anymore. Everything is flagged as a problem. Ainz meets the first of these entities not with hostility, but with curiosity. Their power is immense, but constrained, bound to rules they cannot violate. He tests them carefully, drawing out their abilities, watching how the system reinforces them when they falter. Each reinforcement costs energy. Each correction leaves strain. The math is undeniable. This world cannot sustain escalation indefinitely. As another monarch stirs somewhere beyond the horizon, Ainz finalizes his conclusion. The system will continue breaking itself as long as it tries to contain him. All he has to do is remain present. The strain becomes visible even to ordinary people. The sky above certain regions glitches, colors desaturating for seconds at a time before snapping back into place. Gravity fluctuates near major gates. Time discrepancies are reported, minutes lost, seconds repeating. The system is no longer just managing power. It is bleeding into reality, and reality is rejecting it. Ainz senses the instability spreading like fractures in glass. The structure is failing under its own corrections. He decides to escalate not through violence, but through contradiction. Ainz casts spells that deliberately violate the system's expectations, magic that refuses to register as an action, an attack, or a skill. Effects occur without triggers. Outcomes manifest without costs. The system attempts to log the events and fails. Error cascades ripple outward, forcing emergency rollbacks that partially undo recent awakenings, stripping power from hunters mid-mission and leaving them exposed inside active dungeons. Casualties spike. Humanity pays the price for a system fighting a war it cannot win. At this point, the Hunter Association is no longer issuing commands. They are reacting blindly, chasing symptoms instead of causes. Governments argue behind closed doors about whether Ainz should be classified as an enemy, a god, or an extinction-level inevitability. None of the labels fit. Ainz is not here to destroy the world. He is dismantling its operating system by existing within it. Another monarch enters the battlefield, this one more cautious, its presence accompanied by heavy system reinforcement. The air thickens with authority, laws snapping into place around it like chains. Ainz feels the pressure and smiles. This is closer to what he expected, a ruler shaped by limitation, confident because the rules favor it. Their clash is brief, but revealing. Every time the monarch pushes beyond its allowed threshold, the system intervenes, throttling its output, redirecting energy, protecting its asset. Ainz, unrestricted, adjusts freely. The outcome is inevitable. The monarch retreats, not defeated, but exposed as dependent. The retreat sends shock waves through the hidden hierarchy. Somewhere beyond the visible layers of reality, the architects of the system convene, accelerating contingency plans that were never meant to be used. Ainz senses their urgency. Good. Desperation leads to mistakes. He stands at the center of a broken city, surrounded by undead that exist entirely outside the system's jurisdiction. Around him, gates flicker in and out of existence, unable to stabilize. This world has been measured. Its limits are mapped, its illusions stripped away, and the conclusion is final. The system cannot coexist with a sovereign it did not create. As the next phase begins to form, Ainz Ooal Gown prepares to do what he has always done best. Not conquer through brute force, but rule through inevitability. The breaking point arrives not as an explosion, but as silence. Across the globe, hunter interfaces go dark simultaneously. No warnings, no countdown. Just absence. Skills that once appeared at a thought are gone. Rankings vanish. The invisible scaffolding that defined power for decades simply disconnects, leaving millions of awakened humans standing in a world that no longer recognizes them. For the first time since the gates appeared, humanity is truly alone. Ainz feels the shift immediately. The resistance lessens, like a grip finally loosening after being forced too wide. The system has not shut down completely, but it has retreated inward, isolating core functions to protect itself. In doing so, it has abandoned its greatest strength, omnipresence. Ainz does not pursue it. There is no need. A creature that hides has already admitted weakness. Without the system's mediation, the battlefield changes. Monsters emerging from unstable gates behave erratically, no longer guided by optimized spawn logic. Some collapse on arrival, others rampage without direction. Ainz cleanses entire zones with effortless efficiency, not to save humanity, but to remove variables. Order is required for the next phase, and chaos, when uncontrolled, becomes inefficient. Survivors begin to understand what has happened. Hunters who once defined themselves by rank now feel ordinary, stripped of borrowed authority. Some kneel when Ainz passes, mistaking him for a god. He ignores them. Worship built on fear is fragile, and Ainz has no interest in ruling a world that doesn't yet understand what rule truly means. Deep within the fractured system, contingency protocols activate, locks seal, pathways collapse. Power is rerouted toward a singular objective: delay, not defeat, delay. The architects know now that Ainz cannot be erased, only avoided. And avoidance, Ainz knows, is the prelude to surrender. He stops at the center of the first city that ever fell to a gate, feeling the echoes of a system that once rewrote this world's destiny. His conclusion is complete. This world was never meant to grow. It was meant to be farmed, controlled, reset when necessary. Ainz straightens, undead forces assembling behind him in perfect silence. The measurement phase is over. The system has been weighed, stressed, and found wanting. What comes next is not destruction, but replacement. And as the remaining fragments of the system pull back to prepare their final defense, one truth becomes unavoidable. A world that relies on borrowed rules cannot survive a contact with a king who makes his own. The moment the system retreats, Sung Jin-Woo feels it. Not as a loss of power, but as a disturbance in the silence he has grown accustomed to ruling. The Shadow Realm stirs uneasily, soldiers shifting without command, instincts reacting to something that does not belong. Jin-Woo pauses, eyes narrowing, as a pressure settles over the world that is neither hostile nor friendly. It is sovereign, and it is moving freely. Unlike the others, Jin-Woo does not rely on alerts or interfaces to understand what is happening. His connection runs deeper, anchored to authority rather than permission. He senses the fractures left behind by Ainz's passage, areas where the rules feel thinner, where causality hesitates before asserting itself. This presence is not bound to the system he inherited. That realization alone is enough to demand his attention. As reports pour in of hunters losing abilities and cities stabilizing under an undead army no gate can explain, Jin-Woo reaches a conclusion few others can. This is not a monarch invading from outside. This is a ruler operating independently of the board entirely. The distinction matters. Monarchs challenge order. Kings replace it. He moves without spectacle. No portals, no mass summoning. Just a step into shadow, then another, crossing continents in moments. Along the way, he observes the aftermath Ainz has left behind. Gates closing without clearance. Monsters eliminated without shadows to claim. Undead standing watch where hunter squads once failed. Jin-Woo studies them carefully. They are not bound by resentment or hunger. They obey perfectly. That obedience unsettles him more than raw power ever could. For the first time since inheriting Ashbourne's throne, Jin-Woo feels the weight of uncertainty. His authority over shadows is absolute, but it is still authority granted by a legacy, reinforced by a system that now trembles in retreat. Ainz's power answers to nothing external. It exists by decision alone. When Jin-Woo finally reaches the perimeter of Ainz's influence, he stops. Not because he is afraid, but because instinct demands assessment before engagement. Two domains overlap briefly, shadow brushing against necromancy, each recognizing the other as something fundamentally similar, yet incompatible. The air grows heavy, not with killing intent, but with acknowledgement. Ainz turns first, skeletal gaze locking onto Jin-Woo with immediate comprehension. No introductions are needed, no threats exchanged. At that moment, both rulers understood the truth of the situation. This world is no longer governed by a single king, and what follows will not be a battle of strength, but a collision of dominion. Jin-Woo studies Ainz carefully, noting the calm precision in every movement, the way the undead soldiers arrange themselves as if instinctively obeying a rhythm only their master can feel. These are not shadows, but constructs of death itself, operating outside any system he recognizes. For the first time, he realizes the scale of the anomaly before him. Ainz is not merely powerful. He is absolute in a way Jin-Woo has never encountered. Even the strongest monarchs he has faced are bound by rules, by the frameworks of the system that birthed them. Ainz is untethered, and that untethered authority radiates like a gravitational pull, reshaping the battlefield without effort. The world around them seems to react to their presence. Gates that should spawn monsters collapse before formation. Mana flows in unnatural directions, sometimes retreating from hunters, sometimes bending around Ainz's undead, as though it respects a hierarchy higher than the system itself. Jin-Woo senses the imbalance immediately. Everything the system has built to maintain order, the rules, the rankings, the flow of power, starts to falter in the presence of this sovereign. Even the most skilled hunters observing from a distance feel it in their bones. The world is no longer theirs to govern. Something greater has arrived, and it is measuring them. For the first time, Jin-Woo feels caution. Not hesitation, not fear, but the weight of recognizing an equal in dominance. His shadows shift slightly, instinctively moving closer, forming a defensive perimeter while he contemplates his approach. He cannot act recklessly. This is no ordinary threat to eliminate. Ainz does not simply challenge authority. He overwhelms it entirely. Jin-Woo's mind races, considering every tactic, every spell, every possibility, but finds each constrained by the invisible laws of the system that Ainz ignores entirely. Conventional confrontation would be catastrophic. Ainz, meanwhile, watches with the same calculating gaze. He does not underestimate Jin-Woo, not for a moment. He feels the presence of shadows, millions of them, and the echo of authority that sustains them. A monarch in this world, yes, but a monarch still chained by inherited power and system limitations. That recognition changes nothing for Ainz. It is data, input to refine strategy, to understand the breadth of what this universe allows and what it cannot. Unlike Jin-Woo, he does not hesitate. His decisions are informed, deliberate, and unstoppable. Then the first contact occurs, not through attack, not through magic, but through observation. Shadows brush against undead, sensing intention, measuring alignment. For a moment, time itself feels suspended, as if reality pauses to acknowledge the collision of two rulers. Jin-Woo notes it first, a subtle disruption in the flow of mana, an absence of resistance where there should be recoil. He realizes the truth. Ainz operates in a space outside the system's constraints, a plane where even Jin-Woo's shadows cannot fully define him. The understanding is immediate and undeniable. This is a presence that will not yield, will not submit, and will not be coerced. The stakes are clear. Jin-Woo knows that any misstep, any miscalculation could irreversibly destabilize the world, but beyond caution, there is curiosity. This is a ruler like no other, a power that cannot be measured by the familiar rules, and that alone commands attention. Ainz mirrors the awareness, calculating the same truth about Jin-Woo. Recognition passes between them silently. Each sees in the other not an enemy in the conventional sense, but a sovereign whose very existence challenges the limits of the universe. A confrontation is inevitable, yet neither moves first, understanding that in this standoff, observation is as lethal as offense and information as valuable as destruction. The standoff stretches across the cityscape like a living tension, every building, every street, every gate acting as an unintentional spectator. Even the wind seems hesitant, slowing its flow, as if the world itself pauses to acknowledge the presence of two unparalleled rulers. Jin-Woo's shadows shift subtly, whispering through the streets, testing the bounds of Ainz's aura. The undead remain perfectly still, an unbroken wall of silent authority. Both sides sense instinctively that the other is capable of overwhelming force, yet neither acts hastily, understanding that a single misstep could trigger irreversible catastrophe. Hunters observing from a distance feel dissonance in the world's rhythm. Mana sensors spike erratically, dungeons destabilize, and some monsters vanish entirely before fully materializing. To them, it is incomprehensible, terrifying. Even those who have faced the strongest monarchs cannot interpret the scope of authority radiating from Ainz. Jin-Woo's shadows hesitate at the edges of his perception, responding to a power that defies logic, bending and adapting as if alive. His instincts scream a truth he cannot yet reconcile. He has never encountered a sovereign outside the system itself. Ainz moves subtly, a step here, a gesture there, testing boundaries without issuing an attack. The undead respond instantly, not with aggression, but with awareness, flowing around him in patterns that indicate both discipline and calculation. Jin-Woo notices the responsiveness, how even the smallest motion sends ripples through the environment, how the undead do not merely exist, they dominate the space without leaving it in chaos. Shadows and undead brush past each other in silent acknowledgement, yet the collision causes neither to yield, each maintaining perfect form. Jin-Woo realizes the significance. These are not constructs bound by external rules. They obey will alone, and will alone is something that cannot be measured. The weight of strategy presses on Jin-Woo's mind. He is no longer simply defending humanity. He is now contending with a force whose very existence undermines the fundamental structures he has built. Systems that once guaranteed survival falter in the wake of Ainz's presence. Gates collapse or warp. Skills misfire. The natural flow of power is disrupted globally. Jin-Woo understands that a conventional confrontation is pointless. Any attempt to overpower this being would be met with a response far beyond his calculation. Yet restraint is also dangerous. Inaction allows Ainz to gather data, adapt and prepare, and in that adaptation lies ultimate dominance. Ainz, for his part, studies Jin-Woo with detached precision. He does not underestimate the Shadow Monarch, not even for a moment. He feels the pull of authority that sustains Jin-Woo's army, the subtle rules the system grants him, the inherent limits imposed by the world. Unlike Jin-Woo, Ainz operates free of such constraints. His evaluation is clinical. Each movement, each test, each gesture a probe designed to map the boundaries of this universe. He perceives the fractures in the system caused by his presence, noting how it strains to maintain order in the face of Jin-Woo's inherent power. The conclusions are immediate. This world is fragile, and every monarch that rises is a potential point of failure. Time stretches, measured not by seconds, but by decisions, calculations, and reactions. Shadows and undead exist in perfect balance, each aware of the other, yet unwilling to strike first. Every subtle fluctuation in mana or authority is noted. Jin-Woo senses that this is a standoff that transcends mere combat. It is a meeting of dominions, a clash of existence itself. His thoughts race, considering every contingency, every potential outcome, yet each plan encounters the same problem. Ainz's authority does not conform to the expected rules. It is absolute in a way that neither system nor strategy can fully quantify. Then a minor ripple occurs. An undead soldier moves a fraction faster. A shadow curls around a corner instinctively, and in that instant, both kings recognize that their encounter is inevitable. Neither acts violently, yet both understand the magnitude of what this collision could unleash. The city around them is no longer merely a backdrop. It is a variable, a witness, and a warning. Every structure, every street, every ambient shift in mana becomes a participant in the standoff. In this moment, the world holds its breath, watching two rulers who operate outside conventional limits, each silently acknowledging the other as a sovereign. For the first time since becoming the Shadow Monarch, Jin-Woo feels something alien, the sense that another ruler exists who cannot be dominated, manipulated, or anticipated by the rules he has mastered. The instinct is not fear, but respect, tempered with an awareness of danger. Every shadow at his command reacts to Ainz with subtle hesitation, a recognition that they are facing authority of a fundamentally different kind. Jin-Woo has trained for absolute control. But here, that control is tested in ways he has never imagined. The sheer weight of Ainz's presence bends perception, warping the flow of mana and forcing instincts to adapt in real time. Ainz, skeletal and silent, does not provoke. He observes, studies, and records. His undead soldiers stand as perfect extensions of his will, forming a domain of absolute order. Jin-Woo notices immediately how different this is from Ashbourne's army. The shadows obey instinctively, yet their motions are constrained by inherited logic. The undead, by contrast, obey without thought, without hesitation, without limitation. In one instant, Jin-Woo understands that the difference is not power, it is freedom. Ainz moves unconstrained, while even Jin-Woo's immense force is tethered to systems he cannot alter. For hours they exist in this tense equilibrium. Neither acts, yet the world reacts. Gates erupt and collapse unpredictably. Monster behaviors warp. Even natural phenomena, wind, rain, gravity, register subtle deviations. Observers from distant cities can feel the imbalance, though they cannot comprehend its source. Hunters record anomalies, alarms fail, and chaos spreads, yet Ainz and Jin-Woo are perfectly still, maintaining a silent standoff that radiates absolute authority. In this space, action is unnecessary. Presence alone dictates outcome. Jin-Woo finally breaks the silence, not with a spell, not with an attack, but with movement. Shadows shift forward, probing the edges of Ainz's domain with precision, testing reaction and durability. Ainz allows it, stepping slightly aside, releasing subtle pulses of mana that measure, not harm. The undead respond immediately, intercepting and neutralizing probes without breaking formation. The confrontation becomes an exchange of control rather than destruction, a duel of sovereign influence. Every pulse, every step, every gesture conveys strategy, data, and intent. Both rulers are assessing, adapting, and understanding each other's limits without committing fully to conflict. Ainz notes the adaptive efficiency of Jin-Woo's shadows. He calculates, analyzes, and adjusts his own magic to test the boundaries of response. Jin-Woo, in turn, observes the absolute obedience and fluidity of the undead, recalibrating his expectations. Neither underestimates the other. The standoff becomes a chessboard played at planetary scale, every minor action revealing more about the other's capabilities. The system itself strains to maintain the illusion of control, attempting to intervene and failing at every turn. As hours pass, a mutual understanding crystallizes. Jin-Woo sees that Ainz is a force outside the hierarchy, a sovereign unconstrained by the frameworks of the solo-leveling universe. Ainz recognizes Jin-Woo as a monarch, bound by inherited systems, yet instinctively capable of adaptation and cunning that mirrors his own intellect. Both rulers understand that a conventional battle would be catastrophic, that engagement must be deliberate, measured, and consequential. The city itself becomes a silent witness, scarred and alive with the tension between them. Every broken street, every collapsed gate, every residual surge of mana marks the subtle negotiation of dominance taking place. Neither strikes, yet the implications are clear. Two sovereigns now occupy a world that cannot fully contain either of them. Humanity and the system they rely on are no longer central. They are variables, observers, and potential consequences. Ainz and Jin-Woo, in mutual recognition, have shifted the balance of the world entirely, and the future of the solo-leveling universe is now entwined with a king who answers to no one and a monarch who cannot fully comprehend him. In that moment, one truth becomes undeniable to both of them. This world, measured and controlled for centuries, has now been fundamentally broken. The collision of their presence does not require violence to reshape reality. Observation alone, decision alone, authority alone, these are now the instruments of dominion. And as each ruler steps back to consider the next move, the stage is set for an inevitable confrontation that will not only decide supremacy, but redefine the very rules of existence within this universe. The world shudders under the weight of two sovereign forces operating beyond the rules it once relied on. Ainz Ooal Gown and Sung Jin-Woo no longer respond to the systems designed to regulate power, rank, and survival. Gates erupt unpredictably, hunters lose access to skills mid-combat, and monsters spawn erratically, sometimes disappearing entirely before engaging. Cities once defended by structured protocols now lie exposed, streets littered with the detritus of failed dungeons and unstable gates. Humanity is scrambling, their strategies obsolete, their strongest hunters rendered mere observers to events that defy understanding. Ainz moves through this chaos with the precision of a ruler, every step measured, every action deliberate. His undead follow in perfect synchrony, a force unconstrained by cooldowns, rankings, or energy limits, executing commands with absolute obedience and efficiency that the system itself cannot contest. Jin-Woo watches closely from the shadows, shadows that respond with instinctive coordination, yet are bound by inherited limitations he can manipulate, but not fully override. Unlike Ainz, whose power is unrestricted, Jin-Woo's army must still contend with system-imposed ceilings and dependencies. He tests their limits, pushing his shadows against the undead in controlled probes that ripple across battlefields. Every interaction becomes a measure of strategy rather than brute force, an exchange of dominance without outright combat. Jin-Woo realizes the challenge. Ainz does not fight to prove strength. He fights to understand, to experiment, and to assert authority through observation, influence, and calculated pressure. The world itself has become their arena, every street, building, and open space a variable, a component of a larger, unspoken game that humanity is too small to perceive. The initial encounters escalate subtly. Ainz extends his authority outward, layering necromantic wards and detection spells across regions that were previously dominated by hunter systems. Areas once governed by rank now respond to him alone. Hunters attempting to intervene find themselves met not with retaliation, but with inescapable domination of the environment itself. Spells misfire, weapons jam, even monsters, creatures of instinct and chaos, falter in the presence of an external command that operates independently of the world's mechanics. Jin-Woo senses this shift through the responsiveness of the undead, noting that Ainz's control is not only absolute but also adaptive. Every adjustment he makes to counteract Jin-Woo's shadows is instantaneous, fluid, and executed with an understanding of both intention and consequence. Both rulers are now fully aware of their positions. Ainz knows that the system no longer defines Jin-Woo's limits. He is a monarch whose authority is organic and adaptive and partially independent, yet still tethered to inherited rules. Jin-Woo understands that Ainz is untethered, unconstrained by the frameworks that sustain kingdoms, dungeons, and even the concept of ranking itself. Their confrontation is no longer a duel of attack and defense, but a war of systems versus sovereignty. The very fabric of the solo-leveling universe reacts. Gates destabilize spontaneously, monsters behave unpredictably, and hunters report phenomena that cannot be explained. Ordinary citizens witness fragments of this conflict as buildings shift in ways that defy physics, shadows stretch unnaturally, and regions that were once safe suddenly become death traps. Ainz pushes the experiment further. He begins to integrate areas under his control into a unified domain, linking undead formations across multiple cities to create a web of influence that responds not to mana or skill limits, but to willpower alone. Regions that were once independent now function as extensions of a single sovereign consciousness, allowing him to manipulate battles, terrain, and even the flow of magic with minimal effort. Jin-Woo responds in kind, gathering his shadows into cohesive units, testing Ainz's domain with strategic incursions that probe weaknesses without committing to open combat. Each shadow that encounters undead soldiers becomes part of a study, a measurement of adaptability and efficiency. Jin-Woo realizes that conventional warfare is futile. The battlefield itself is no longer neutral, but a malleable tool wielded by rulers whose influence transcends the systems of the world. The system attempts to intervene, Hidden architects push reinforcement program, activating contingency dungeons, artificially boosting hunters, and deploying monsters with unprecedented AI. Gates spawn with calculated precision, meant to overwhelm both Ainz and Jin-Woo simultaneously. Yet the plan falters almost immediately. Ainz's undead neutralize threats effortlessly, turning enemies into obedient soldiers, while Jin-Woo's shadows adapt and exploit inconsistencies in the system's logic. Every action taken by the system is countered, subverted, or rendered meaningless by the raw dominance of two rulers operating outside its framework. The world begins to fracture along lines defined not by laws, skill, or hierarchy, but by the influence of sovereign will. In cities where dungeons erupt, humans scramble for survival. But survival is no longer the point. Entire landscapes have become arenas for the assertion of absolute authority. Hunters experience a terrifying new reality. Their strength, once measured and meaningful, is irrelevant in the presence of rulers whose power is derived from will, strategy, and unbounded adaptation. Ainz and Jin-Woo navigate these zones with the precision of generals conducting experiments, rather than warriors seeking victory. Each deployment of shadows or undead is a calculation, each maneuver designed to probe, test, and manipulate the battlefield rather than destroy it outright. As the day progresses, the system's response becomes erratic, fragmented by the overwhelming influence of two sovereigns. It cannot maintain cohesion, cannot enforce rules, and cannot predict outcomes. Regions of the world begin to operate under local influences rather than system control. Hunters awaken to powers that no longer align with training. Dungeons collapse or spawn uncontrollably. Ordinary people encounter monsters, undead, and shadows in ways that defy explanation. Ainz Ooal Gown and Sung Jin-Woo exist not merely as participants in this chaos, but as the axes around which reality now pivots. Every observation confirms a single truth. In this world, systems are fragile when confronted by will unconstrained. Both Ainz and Jin-Woo now operate without the constraints that once defined monarchs, hunters, and even gods. Their presence alone reshapes reality, revealing the underlying brittleness of the solo-leveling universe. The old hierarchy, built on rules, rankings, and system-imposed limitations, is no longer relevant. What remains is sovereignty, and both rulers now occupy a plane where authority itself is weaponized. The cities, dungeons, and landscapes around them respond not to commands, but to intent. As Ainz extends his domain further, absorbing regions into his influence and asserting absolute control over life, death, and mana, Jin-Woo prepares to meet him fully, shadows stretching into formations designed to test the limits of authority itself. This is no longer a battle over territory or rank. It is a confrontation of fundamental principles: unbound sovereignty versus inherited dominance, will versus system, adaptability versus enforcement. Every movement, every reaction, every strategic choice serves as both a probe and a declaration, reshaping the solo-leveling universe in real time. The world watches helplessly. Gates collapse unpredictably. Dungeons erupt uncontrollably. Hunters lose command of their skills mid-battle. Citizens flee from zones now defined by sovereign influence rather than law or order. The system that once structured this world trembles and fractures. Two rulers, unbound by its constraints, have transformed reality itself into a chessboard, and humanity is left as both observer and pawn. Ainz Ooal Gown moves through the chaos with deliberate calm, undead forces shifting like liquid extensions of his will. Jin-Woo responds with equal precision, shadows adapting to every subtle adjustment, testing boundaries and pushing limits. The confrontation is no longer about victory, survival, or dominance in the traditional sense. It is about control over reality itself. And in this new paradigm, conventional power is meaningless. Only authority, adaptability, and sovereignty determine outcome. The solo-leveling universe, once governed by predictable systems and rankings, is now a fractured stage for two rulers whose influence is absolute. Neither Ainz nor Jin-Woo shows weakness. Neither yields. Every spell, shadow, and movement becomes a probe into the limits of the other's dominion. The world is no longer measured by strength, skill, or hierarchy. It is measured by will, adaptability, and the capacity to operate beyond imposed constraints. At this moment, the system itself begins to realize its own obsolescence. Attempts at reinforcement fail. Contingency measures collapse under the weight of unbound sovereignty. The solo-leveling universe, for the first time, recognizes that rulers who exist without systems can redefine reality entirely. And as Ainz and Jin-Woo prepare for the next phase, every city, every dungeon, and every human life becomes a variable in a game whose rules have been rewritten by kings without systems. The fractures in the world become increasingly visible as the hours pass. Gates erupt erratically, some collapsing before anyone can enter. Monsters appear in unnatural formations, behaving in ways that defy both instinct and the logic imposed by the system. Hunters report sudden surges and lapses in power, some losing control of abilities they had mastered for years, while others awaken to unexpected anomalies that overwhelm them entirely. Civilians witness glimpses of Ainz's undead and Jin-Woo's shadows moving through cities like storms of living authority, neither attacking indiscriminately, yet leaving streets and districts in altered states. Buildings tilt subtly, streets buckle, and mana saturates the air in waves that force even experienced hunters to adapt instinctively. Ainz moves through this chaos like a ruler assessing a kingdom, every step and gesture executed with deliberate intent. His undead, perfectly coordinated, extend his will across the landscape, neutralizing threats not by aggression but by absolute control. They intercept monsters mid-spawn, dissolve rogue dungeons, and reposition themselves to maintain dominance over entire districts without a single command needing to be spoken. Each undead serves as both an agent of influence and a censor, feeding data to Ainz in real time. Jin-Woo observes this with sharp focus, noting the fluidity and efficiency of a system unconstrained by limitations, a method of control that is simultaneously offensive, defensive, and analytical. In response, Jin-Woo tests the limits of his shadows. He sends small, controlled detachments into Ainz's domain, observing their interaction with undead soldiers. Shadows clash with the undead, probing weaknesses, measuring reaction times, and testing adaptability. Unlike conventional combat, there is no overwhelming force applied at first. Every movement is calculated, every strike a probe, every retreat an experiment. Jin-Woo recognizes a crucial truth. This is not a battle to win by brute strength, but a war of influence, manipulation, and understanding. His shadows act like extensions of his mind, testing parameters, noting failures, and adapting instantaneously. The environment itself becomes a participant. Streets warp under the pressure of overlapping dominions, dungeons collapse unpredictably, and mana flows erratically, bending to the presence of both rulers. Even natural phenomena, from sudden gusts of wind to electrical storms forming spontaneously, respond to their influence. Ordinary humans cannot understand the scale of these changes. They are spectators of a reality that has been reshaped by forces beyond comprehension. Hunters attempt to intervene but quickly realize that conventional tactics are meaningless. Power, ranking, and strategy are irrelevant against rulers who manipulate the rules themselves. Ainz expands his influence further, linking undead formations across cities into a network of absolute control. Regions once isolated now operate in perfect harmony with his will, allowing him to manipulate terrain, suppress threats, and project authority on a scale that the system struggles to monitor. Jin-Woo counters by concentrating his shadows into cohesive formations designed for adaptability rather than raw power, probing Ainz's domain for inconsistencies and openings. Every encounter, no matter how small, generates data that informs the next move for both rulers. This is a contest of intellect and sovereignty as much as it is of power. The system reacts desperately, activating emergency protocols, unleashing previously sealed dungeons, artificially enhancing hunters and attempting to stabilize regions under attack. Yet each measure fails. Ainz neutralizes threats before they materialize fully, while Jin-Woo's shadows exploit logic gaps and weaknesses in the system's design. The two rulers are no longer simply fighting, they are rewriting the parameters of the universe itself, proving that authority can exist outside the control of any governing system. As the hours drag on, the solo-leveling universe becomes a landscape of sovereign influence. Cities, dungeons, and open terrain shift unpredictably, molded by the decisions and will of Ainz and Jin-Woo. Hunters, civilians, and monsters alike respond not to rankings or commands, but to the palpable presence of power that exists independently of any system. Each ruler measures, adapts, and asserts dominance in ways that defy conventional understanding, reshaping the battlefield continuously. The concept of control itself is being rewritten, and the world can only watch as two unbound powers demonstrate the ultimate truth. Systems are fragile when confronted by rulers who define reality through the will alone. In this crucible, both Ainz and Jin-Woo recognize the boundaries of conventional strategy. Ainz, unbound and absolute, manipulates the environment and all living and non-living elements within it effortlessly. Jin-Woo, adaptive and instinctive, leverages shadows with surgical precision, testing the extent of the undead's coordination and Ainz's strategic reach. Every interaction becomes a probe, a demonstration of sovereignty, and a silent assertion that neither ruler is subject to the confines of the solo-leveling universe. The world stands broken and reactive, shaped entirely by the two kings without systems. Gates behave unpredictably, dungeons erupt uncontrollably, hunters lose mastery over their abilities, and citizens witness phenomena they cannot rationalize. Every city, battlefield, and region reflects the balance of authority between Ainz and Jin-Woo, a constant negotiation of dominance that does not rely on combat alone. In this new reality, presence, calculation, and the exercise of absolute will define the order of the universe, demonstrating that kings without systems are forces capable of redefining existence itself. The world continues to shift under the influence of two unbound rulers. Ainz Ooal Gown expands his dominion not through violence, but through command, turning districts, entire cities, and unstable dungeons into extensions of his will. Every undead soldier acts not as a mere tool, but as an autonomous agent, capable of assessing threats, redirecting resources, and stabilizing regions in real time. His influence bends the environment subtly yet decisively. Streets reroute themselves, gates fail to spawn monsters when he deems it unnecessary, and mana flows in patterns that the system cannot anticipate. Jin-Woo observes all of this with keen attention, testing the edges of this sovereignty with carefully deployed shadows. Each probe, each minor clash, reveals both limits and adaptability, creating a dialogue of dominance without traditional combat. Jin-Woo feels the magnitude of Ainz's authority firsthand. His shadows react instinctively, sensing threats and counteractions, yet they struggle to fully predict the precision and efficiency of the undead's responses. Unlike conventional opponents, Ainz does not overcommit or miscalculate. His moves are intentional, each action doubling as a measurement of intent, reaction, and outcome. For Jin-Woo, this is both a challenge and a revelation. He realizes that a battle against Ainz is not about offense, defense, or even tactical superiority. It is about adapting to a sovereign who exists beyond constraints, whose will alone alters reality, forcing Jin-Woo to operate in a realm where traditional rules no longer apply. The system, meanwhile, continues to strain under the dual pressure of these sovereigns. Emergency protocols activate automatically. Gates are reinforced, hunters receive artificial boosts, and contingency dungeons attempt to contain the spread of Ainz's influence. Yet each intervention fails almost immediately. Ainz neutralizes threats with surgical precision, turning enemies into obedient servants or nullifying anomalies before they fully form. Jin-Woo's shadows exploit errors, miscalculations, and logic gaps in the system's programming, destabilizing reinforced dungeons and turning enhanced hunters into temporary variables rather than threats. The architects behind the system realize too late that their rules, their safeguards, and their hierarchies are no longer relevant. As the interaction between the two rulers continues, the scale of influence expands. Entire regions begin to operate under localized dominion, areas where the system's authority has effectively collapsed under the weight of sovereign will. Civilians witness phenomena that defy explanation: streets bending, shadows moving independently, undead soldiers silently reorganizing entire districts. Hunters experience a terrifying new reality where their power is meaningless unless aligned with these higher authorities. Even the strongest elite cannot assert dominance. Their rankings and abilities are irrelevant when two forces operate beyond all systemic constraints. Ainz and Jin-Woo engage in a subtle contest of influence. The undead act not with hostility, but with absolute control, neutralizing hazards, manipulating terrain, and enforcing stability according to Ainz's will. Shadows probe, intercept, and adapt, each movement testing vulnerabilities, studying patterns, and adjusting in real time. Neither ruler strikes out of necessity. Each understands that the exercise of authority itself, precision, adaptation, and observation, is the ultimate expression of power. Every minor maneuver, every adjustment of troops or shadows, and every manipulation of the environment becomes a demonstration of sovereignty, a declaration that systems are irrelevant when confronted by will unconstrained. The solo-leveling universe begins to fracture visibly. Gates erupt in unpredictable patterns, some failing to spawn monsters entirely, others releasing creatures with warped behaviors that the system cannot manage. Dungeons destabilize, collapsing into fragments or multiplying uncontrollably. Hunters lose the ability to fully command their skills, while civilians experience reality itself as unpredictable and dangerous. Nature responds to sovereign influence. Wind flows unnaturally. Clouds shift against prevailing currents, and atmospheric anomalies occur over regions under direct observation by either ruler. The world is no longer a stage governed by rules. It is a canvas, constantly reshaped by the wills of Ainz and Jin-Woo. The system's attempts at repairs grow desperate. Automated reinforcements deploy, contingency monsters emerge, and artificial power boosts are forced onto hunters, yet all fail under the combined influence of the two sovereigns. Gates close before enemies can exit, monsters are converted or neutralized before engagement, and the landscape itself seems to resist systemic intervention. Ainz's undead and Jin-Woo's shadows interact seamlessly with these anomalies, turning the system's efforts into a study rather than a threat. Each failure reinforces the same undeniable conclusion. In a world confronted by rulers without systems, conventional rules are meaningless. Within this evolving chaos, a new hierarchy begins to emerge. Not one based on rankings, levels, or system approval, but on sovereignty itself. Regions are defined by the reach of Ainz's will, or by the adaptability of Jin-Woo's shadows. Where undead enforce order, stability emerges. Where shadows probe, adaptability and resilience dominate. Hunters, civilians, and monsters alike respond not to authority imposed by the system, but to the tangible influence of rulers whose command exists independently of imposed constraints. The world is no longer predictable. It is reactive, adaptive, and entirely shaped by the presence of kings without systems. Ainz Ooal Gown continues to expand, asserting control across districts, neutralizing unstable dungeons, and turning anomalies into instruments of authority. Jin-Woo counters, sending shadows into the heart of these territories, testing limits, creating adaptive formations, and exploiting inconsistencies. Neither acts out of aggression. Each movement, each adjustment, each calculation is both an experiment and a declaration of unbound sovereignty. The confrontation has evolved into a battle of dominion, a demonstration that reality itself can be reshaped when rulers exist outside the frameworks designed to contain them. The cities, dungeons, and landscapes of the solo-leveling universe bear witness to this unprecedented paradigm. Hunters can only scramble to survive. Systems fail, and ordinary humans experience events they cannot rationalize. Gates, dungeons, and even natural phenomena respond not to rules, but to the sovereign presence of Ainz and Jin-Woo. In this crucible, traditional measures of power, rankings, levels, abilities are meaningless. Only adaptability, absolute will, and the capacity to operate beyond imposed systems define order. At this moment, the solo-leveling universe has fundamentally changed. Systems have been rendered secondary, rankings irrelevant, and the authority of humans diminished in the presence of two rulers who operate entirely outside constraints. Ainz Ooal Gown and Sung Jin-Woo exist as forces that reshape reality through intent alone, their influence extending across cities, dungeons, and landscapes. The future is no longer dictated by the system. It is dictated by kings without systems. As the influence of Ainz and Jin-Woo spreads, the distinction between battlefield and environment dissolves entirely. Streets bend subtly under the force of their will, gates open and collapse without pattern, and monsters spawn, or fail to spawn, according to intentions that no mortal observer can predict. Civilians witness phenomena that defy logic, shadows moving independently of their caster, undead silently reorganizing entire districts, streets realigning, and structures subtly shifting as if aware of the presence of two omnipotent rulers. Hunters at the front lines struggle to act, only realizing too late that their rankings, skills, and authority are meaningless here. Survival depends not on mastery, but on proximity, adaptability, and awareness of forces beyond comprehension. Ainz extends his domain with measured precision. Each undead soldier becomes a node in a vast network, an autonomous extension of his will, capable of influencing life, mana, and environment with unerring accuracy. Entire cities come under his subtle control, where order is enforced without overt force, dangers neutralized before they manifest, and anomalies reshaped into instruments of influence. Jin-Woo's shadows counter with fluid adaptability, probing gaps, testing response patterns, and exploiting even the smallest inconsistencies in Ainz's web of control. The interplay is not chaotic but deliberate, a continuous exchange of dominance without the need for destruction. Every interaction becomes data, and every movement becomes an assertion of sovereignty. The system strains desperately to maintain stability, activating contingency protocols, artificially boosting hunters, and unleashing monsters and dungeons at unprecedented rates. Yet these attempts fail almost immediately. Ainz's undead neutralize threats with absolute authority, while Jin-Woo's shadows exploit miscalculations and inconsistencies with surgical precision. Even where the system forces hunters to awaken beyond their natural limits, those enhancements are temporary and unstable, quickly collapsing under the ruler's influence. The world is no longer governed by rules, but by the interaction of two forces beyond all control, a collision of sovereign wills that renders system hierarchies meaningless. The landscape itself becomes a reflection of their authority. Areas under Ainz's influence exhibit subtle, pervasive control, monsters rerouted, environmental hazards neutralized, and districts operating as cohesive, obedient extensions of his will. Areas influenced by Jin-Woo display adaptability and fluidity. Shadows moving autonomously, preemptively intercepting threats, and dynamically responding to variables faster than any system could calculate. Hunters caught between these zones experience both awe and terror, realizing that their power and training are irrelevant against entities who exist beyond systemic limitations. Ordinary citizens witness fragments of these changes and assume that the world is unmaking itself, never comprehending that it is simply being reshaped by kings without systems. The interaction between Ainz and Jin-Woo escalates beyond physical manipulation into a contest of pure authority. Each minor gesture, each deployment of forces, each adjustment of territory serves to assert dominance, gather intelligence, and test the limits of the other's influence. Neither ruler acts hastily. Every maneuver is both experiment and declaration, revealing capability without provoking unnecessary confrontation. Even as chaos spreads across cities and dungeons, it is not mindless destruction, but a controlled reshaping of reality to suit the will of the sovereigns. The distinction between battlefield and environment blurs entirely, as every district, dungeon, and street responds to the presence of these rulers rather than to laws or rules. The system grows frantic, activating emergency protocols designed to stabilize regions and suppress anomalies. But each measure fails spectacularly. Gates collapse before monsters can emerge, artificially enhanced hunters misfire, and dungeons distort beyond expectation. The influence of Ainz and Jin-Woo overwhelms these interventions, exposing the system's fragility. With every failure, the rulers demonstrate a fundamental truth. Authority without constraints reshapes reality itself. Control no longer flows from rules, rankings, or hierarchy, but from the will, adaptability, and absolute presence of those who define it. In this crucible, two forms of sovereignty operate simultaneously, reshaping the world along incompatible yet equally potent lines. Ainz's absolute deliberate control asserts order, influence, and inevitability. Jin-Woo's adaptive, instinct-driven dominion emphasizes flexibility, prediction, and exploitation of gaps. Where one enforces, the other probes. Where one stabilizes, the other tests. Their presence alone forces the solo-leveling universe to respond in ways it was never designed to accommodate. The result is a world transformed. Cities, landscapes, and dungeons no longer function according to system logic. Hunters and civilians alike must navigate an environment where conventional understanding is meaningless. Gates, monsters, and even natural phenomena operate under the influence of two sovereign wills. Their patterns unpredictable, their behavior governed by intent rather than rule. The solo-leveling universe has ceased to be a system-managed hierarchy and has become a dynamic arena of sovereignty, where kings without systems dictate reality itself. As Ainz and Jin-Woo continue their silent contest, observing, probing, and asserting authority, one undeniable truth emerges. The solo-leveling universe is no longer measured by rank, level, or skill. It is measured by will, adaptability, and the capacity to exist beyond systems. Both rulers now occupy planes of influence that transcend conventional understanding. Humanity and its constructs are secondary, spectators in a reality reshaped by kings who answer to nothing, constrained by nothing, and defined only by the absolute exercise of their sovereign authority. The stage is set, and the world awaits the next move of entities that operate beyond all rules. The solo-leveling universe, fractured and recalibrated, trembles under the presence of two sovereigns whose authority no system can contain. Ainz Ooal Gown and Sung Jin-Woo move through cities, dungeons, and landscapes not as combatants, but as forces that redefine reality itself. Gates erupt unpredictably, monsters spawn or vanish without reason, and hunters find their skills faltering or shifting in ways that defy explanation. The natural world bends subtly to their wills. Authority now exists outside hierarchy, rules, or logic, and every element of the world responds to the interplay of their dominion. Ainz advances with deliberate precision, his skeletal figure a dark silhouette against the twisted skyline. Undead soldiers stretch across regions like living conduits of absolute control, neutralizing hazards, reorganizing terrain, and stabilizing anomalies before they can manifest. Each undead is autonomous, simultaneously observer, executor, and sentinel, extending Ainz's influence across the environment without chaos. He does not strike unnecessarily. Presence alone bends reality, enforcing dominion in ways that leave Jin-Woo observing with wary calculation. Shadows sent to test the undead retract instinctively as Jin-Woo senses the depth of precision behind every movement. Ainz is untethered from the world's rules, operating on a plane of will that cannot be measured or contained. Jin-Woo responds in equal measure, stretching his shadows far beyond the immediate battlefield to probe, test, and exploit vulnerabilities in Ainz's domain. Each shadow functions autonomously, adapting in real time, intercepting anomalies, and countering potential threats before they become actionable. Every probe is both a study and a declaration, testing the limits of the undead while conveying intent without overt engagement. Jin-Woo understands that conventional combat would be catastrophic. This is not about striking first or overpowering. This is a war of influence, observation, and calculation, where every minor movement carries implications that ripple across the universe. The environment becomes a battlefield and a participant simultaneously. Streets buckle under pressure, gates misfire, and dungeons destabilize unpredictably. Mana currents warp, elemental surges appear, and natural phenomena respond subtly to sovereign influence. Hunters, caught between the two rulers, find their powers unreliable, their strategies ineffective. Civilians witness anomalies that defy logic. Shadows moving independently, undead silently reorganizing cityscapes, and buildings subtly shifting as if aware of the forces operating above them. Even the system struggles to comprehend what is unfolding, activating contingency protocols that fail almost instantly. Ainz extends his control, linking undead formations across regions into a cohesive network. Entire cities function as extensions of his will, threats neutralized preemptively, and environmental anomalies corrected before they escalate. Jin-Woo counters by orchestrating his shadows in dynamic formations designed to infiltrate, adapt, and exploit subtle inconsistencies in Ainz's network. Every maneuver, every deployment of force, every subtle adjustment of territory is simultaneously an experiment, a probe, and a declaration of sovereignty. Neither ruler moves recklessly. Every decision is calculated, every action measured to avoid unnecessary destabilization while asserting dominance. The system, strained beyond recognition, scrambles to respond. Gates collapse mid-spawn. Monsters behave unpredictably, and artificially enhanced hunters fail to provide meaningful opposition. Dungeons erupt uncontrollably or collapse entirely. Ainz neutralizes these threats with precision, converting potential chaos into instruments of authority. Jin-Woo exploits the smallest gaps, destabilizing reinforced areas with adaptive precision. Conventional metrics of power, rank, or level are meaningless. The solo-leveling universe now bends exclusively to the will of rulers who operate beyond all systemic constraints. Ainz's influence imposes deliberate order. Undead restructure districts, manipulate terrain, and preemptively neutralize anomalies. Jin-Woo's shadows respond fluidly, probing, adapting, and exploiting inconsistencies. Their interaction is no longer combat in a traditional sense. It is a contest of authority and adaptability, where observation, calculation, and the precise exertion of influence determine control. Every city, dungeon, and environment becomes a variable in the ongoing negotiation of dominance, a testament to the impossibility of system-based governance against kings without systems. Reality itself reshapes in response. Gates behave erratically, dungeons distort, and hunters lose mastery over their powers. Civilians witness phenomena they cannot rationalize, while natural forces subtly bend under the sovereign influence of the two rulers. The world no longer follows the system's logic. It responds to intent, adaptability, and presence. Every interaction between undead and shadows shifts the balance of power, asserting control over regions without a single overt strike. Authority alone, unbound and absolute, now dictates the rules of existence. As the hours stretch on, the interaction between Ainz and Jin-Woo escalates beyond comprehension. Their influence extends across multiple regions simultaneously, each movement reshaping cities, dungeons, and the natural environment. Streets shift subtly, gates erupt unpredictably, and monsters spawn or vanish depending on the presence of undead or shadows. Hunters, once confident in their skills and strategies, find themselves reacting instinctively rather than intentionally. Elite hunters falter, ordinary civilians panic, and the system itself struggles to process events. Reality is no longer bound by rules, rankings, or logic. It bends to the absolute authority of these two rulers. Ainz's skeletal form moves methodically across the battlefield, each step radiating presence. Undead soldiers act not as tools, but as autonomous extensions of his will. They restructure streets, reroute dungeons, and neutralize threats before they fully materialize. Every motion is deliberate, every adjustment precise. Ainz does not waste force. He does not need to. The world responds to his authority, obeying it instinctively. Jin-Woo watches, calculating, probing the limits of this influence with every shadow at his command. His forces adapt in real time, weaving through cityscapes, testing responses, and observing the depth of control exerted by the undead. Every shadow becomes both a scout and an experiment, measuring not only strength but adaptability. The system attempts desperate interventions. Gates close before monsters fully emerge, contingency dungeons trigger prematurely, and artificially enhanced hunters misfire or collapse under the sheer strain of conflicting influences. Even elite units fail to make a measurable impact. Ainz neutralizes these threats with flawless precision, converting potential chaos into instruments of control. Jin-Woo exploits every inconsistency, destabilizing dungeons, redirecting shadows to manipulate battlefield conditions, and probing weaknesses in Ainz's ever-expanding domain. The interaction between the two rulers is no longer battle. It is a silent war of influence, observation, and adaptation, where every move serves to assert dominance and gather data simultaneously. Across regions, the environment becomes a reflection of their sovereignty. Streets, buildings, and even natural terrain respond to presence, subtly shifting to favor one force or another. In zones dominated by Ainz, undead reorganize entire districts with uncanny efficiency, neutralizing hazards before they can disrupt order. In zones dominated by Jin-Woo, shadows move dynamically, intercepting anomalies, adapting to threats, and exploiting any gap in control. Hunters and civilians caught in these zones experience the world as a living, reactive entity, shaped entirely by forces beyond comprehension. The solo-leveling universe has ceased to operate under predictable laws. It now responds solely to sovereign will. The balance of power becomes increasingly apparent. Ainz embodies absolute deliberate authority, a force that enforces inevitability and order. Jin-Woo embodies adaptive, instinctive sovereignty, probing, reacting, and exploiting to redefine outcomes. Where one imposes, the other tests. Where one stabilizes, the other adapts. Every interaction between undead and shadows functions as both experiment and assertion of dominance, reshaping the battlefield in real time. The system, with all its hierarchy and rules, cannot keep pace. The concepts of rank, level, or skill have become irrelevant. What matters now is presence, intent, and adaptability, the capacity to operate beyond constraints. As the two rulers continue their silent contest, their influence expands further. Entire cities operate under their shadow or undead authority. Dungeons erupt unpredictably, monsters behave erratically, and the natural world bends subtly to their wills. Even system-enhanced hunters are rendered secondary, their abilities overridden by sovereign influence. Each movement of Ainz or Jin-Woo shifts entire regions, turning the environment into a dynamic chessboard where every variable is dictated by intent rather than rule. Humanity watches helplessly, unable to affect outcomes as the ultimate test of power unfolds. The endgame has intensified. The stakes are no longer territorial control, survival, or victory in a traditional sense. They are about the reshaping of reality itself. Each sovereign observes, adapts, and asserts influence, understanding that the consequences of miscalculation could destabilize entire regions. Every deployment of undead or shadow functions as both strategy and experiment, demonstrating that control exists beyond hierarchy, beyond systems, and beyond logic. The solo-leveling universe has been irrevocably transformed. In this evolving landscape, the inevitable truth becomes clear. Ainz Ooal Gown and Sung Jin-Woo no longer operate within the confines of the system. Their dominion exists outside levels, ranks, or enforced rules. The world is their instrument, reality is their battlefield, and authority is the weapon that defines every outcome. Regions bend, dungeons collapse, and human power becomes inconsequential, replaced entirely by the exertion of absolute will. Both rulers are kings without systems, their presence alone redefining what it means to exist, to dominate, and to control. The intensity of their silent contest escalates, yet neither ruler commits to outright destruction. Instead, the world becomes their canvas, a stage where influence, observation, and adaptation define supremacy. Ainz's undead move like extensions of thought, anticipating threats before they materialize, reorganizing entire districts with surgical precision. Streets shift subtly to funnel hostile entities into neutralized zones. Dungeons collapse in controlled patterns, and mana flows in orchestrated currents that favor his strategic positioning. Every gesture, every micro-adjustment conveys calculation, intent, and absolute authority. Jin-Woo's shadows counter with equal sophistication. They spread across cities and dungeons, moving autonomously to probe weaknesses, intercept anomalies, and exploit even the smallest gaps in Ainz's domain. Shadows adapt instantaneously, responding not only to movement but to intention, predicting outcomes and creating contingencies that challenge the undead's efficiency. Each encounter is both test and declaration, a demonstration that adaptation can rival absolute control. The interaction between undead and shadows is no longer combat. It is a negotiation of dominance, a dynamic equilibrium where each side measures, probes, and recalibrates constantly. The system grows frantic, its emergency protocols failing spectacularly under the pressure of two forces operating beyond rules. Gates misfire, dungeons destabilize, and artificially enhanced hunters collapse or falter unpredictably. Even elite units cannot maintain order, rendered ineffective by sovereign influence that exists outside conventional limitations. Ainz neutralizes potential chaos with efficiency, converting threats into extensions of his will, while Jin-Woo exploits logic gaps and system miscalculations to assert adaptive influence. Reality itself bends around them, responding to intent rather than design. Across the landscape, regions now operate according to the dominance of one ruler or the other. Zones under Ainz's influence exhibit deliberate order, monsters neutralized, environmental hazards corrected, and anomalies absorbed into his control. Zones under Jin-Woo's influence are fluid and dynamic. Shadows intercept, adapt, and manipulate conditions, forcing instability where precision alone cannot achieve it. Civilians and hunters alike navigate a world that reacts unpredictably, a universe reshaped by the presence of two kings whose authority exists beyond any system. Ordinary understanding fails. Survival requires awareness of forces beyond comprehension. Both rulers recognize that conventional victory is impossible. This is no longer about defeating the other. It is about asserting supremacy in a universe where influence itself defines reality. Every action, every minor adjustment, every deployment of undead or shadow becomes a statement of dominion. Observation is weaponized. Adaptation is strategy. Presence alone dictates outcomes, and the consequences of miscalculation could destabilize entire cities. Each maneuver conveys both control and intelligence, transforming the environment into a living, responsive arena that mirrors the will of its sovereigns. The impact on humanity and hunters is catastrophic yet subtle. Elite hunters, once masters of power and rank, find themselves secondary actors, unable to impose order or assert control. Ordinary citizens witness reality bending in ways they cannot comprehend. Shadows moving independently, buildings subtly shifting, streets contorting to guide or trap entities. Monsters behave erratically, sometimes collapsing before engagement or attacking in unpredictable patterns. The system, which once dictated every aspect of life and death, falters entirely, proving its obsolescence in the presence of rulers without constraints. Ainz and Jin-Woo's interplay transforms the solo-leveling universe into a living experiment. Every movement is measured, every adaptation noted, and every response calibrated. Undead and shadows interact with intelligence and autonomy, creating a network of influence that spans cities, dungeons, and landscapes. Gates, dungeons, and natural phenomena all respond to the subtle tension between these two forces. The world itself becomes both battlefield and instrument, its stability contingent on the decisions of kings who answer to nothing but their own intent. Time stretches as their influence reaches deeper into the universe. Entire regions shift, reshaping districts, neutralizing anomalies, and creating zones of dominance that operate independently of system logic. Hunters and civilians alike are forced into reactive existence, powerless against rulers who manipulate reality itself. Every shadow and undead soldier becomes both extension and observer, adapting in real time, testing limits, and asserting sovereignty. The balance between absolute control and adaptive influence defines the new order of existence. The ultimate truth crystallizes. The solo-leveling universe is no longer governed by rules, rankings, or systemic authority. It is defined entirely by the exercise of will, adaptability, and presence. Ainz Ooal Gown and Sung Jin-Woo have transcended conventional power, operating in a realm where authority itself is the ultimate weapon. Their contest has become a demonstration of what it means to be rulers unbound by limitations, kings whose presence alone reshapes reality. Cities, landscapes, dungeons, and even the flow of life and mana respond to them. The universe is their instrument, and the end of the game is not a battle to win. It is a world rewritten by sovereign authority. The tension between Ainz Ooal Gown and Sung Jin-Woo reaches its apex. Neither ruler strikes out of haste or aggression. Every movement, every deployment, every subtle adjustment of their forces is deliberate, a silent declaration of absolute authority. Ainz expands his influence like a calculated shadow over the world, his undead extending their reach to encompass entire regions, neutralizing anomalies and restructuring terrain before threats even emerge. Streets, buildings, and even dungeons realign themselves under his silent command, obeying patterns dictated solely by his will. Presence alone bends reality, and even Jin-Woo acknowledges the precision of a sovereign who operates without limitations. Jin-Woo's shadows, in turn, move with uncanny fluidity, weaving through cities and dungeons as extensions of his consciousness. Each shadow functions autonomously, predicting, adapting, and intercepting threats in real time. Where Ainz imposes inevitability, Jin-Woo introduces adaptability, testing gaps, exploiting weaknesses, and reshaping battlefields dynamically. The interaction between undead and shadows is no longer a conflict. It is a silent negotiation, a continuous exchange of dominance where every action conveys intent, probes limits, and asserts authority. Their influence transforms the world into a living arena, a universe responding to will rather than rule. The solo-leveling universe itself reacts, reshaping under the pressure of these two sovereigns. Gates collapse or spawn unpredictably. Monsters behave erratically, and dungeons erupt or crumble according to the invisible tug-of-war between influence and adaptation. Hunters lose mastery over abilities, elite or otherwise, while ordinary civilians navigate a world that behaves like a sentient, reactive entity. Even elemental forces, wind, lightning, and fire, shift subtly in response to their presence, bending to the patterns of control and influence that emanate from two rulers who exist entirely outside constraints. The system, once the backbone of this universe, falters completely, its logic and authority rendered irrelevant. As the game reaches its climax, it becomes clear that this is not a battle of destruction, but of reshaping. Both rulers assert dominance, but neither seeks annihilation. Instead, every maneuver is a study, every engagement a demonstration, every adjustment a declaration of unbound sovereignty. Ainz measures, stabilizes, and manipulates. Jin-Woo probes, adapts, and destabilizes. Together, they transform the landscape into a living chessboard, where every entity, from monsters to humans to natural phenomena, becomes a variable in the ongoing negotiation of influence. Survival, hierarchy, and ranking are meaningless. The universe now bends entirely to the will of kings without systems. The scope of their influence continues to expand. Entire cities operate under the silent sway of undead or shadows. Dungeons erupt unpredictably, and the natural world itself aligns with the intentions of these rulers. Hunters witness phenomena beyond comprehension. Civilians flee from zones where reality has shifted, and the system scrambles to respond with emergency protocols that collapse under the weight of two forces beyond rules. Authority now exists as presence, adaptability, and absolute will. The concept of power as measured by levels or rankings is obsolete. The only measure that matters is sovereignty. Finally, a subtle equilibrium emerges. Neither Ainz nor Jin-Woo yields, yet neither can dominate fully. Their forces intertwine, the undead and shadows creating a complex lattice of influence across the world. Regions are stabilized, destabilized, tested, and reshaped continuously. The solo-leveling universe has been irrevocably altered. Its hierarchy is gone. Its rules are irrelevant. Humanity exists as observers, witnesses to a demonstration of what it means to exist beyond constraints. Authority itself has become the ultimate metric of reality, and the world has learned to bend to those who define it. Ainz and Jin-Woo stand as kings without systems, rulers whose presence alone redefines existence. The solo-leveling universe has reached the end of the game, not in victory or defeat, but in revelation. Conventional measures of power no longer apply. Systems, rankings, and even innate strength are secondary to the capacity to impose will, adapt, and shape reality. In this new paradigm, every district, dungeon, and city becomes a reflection of their dominance. Every shadow and undead soldier an extension of sovereign influence, and every gate, monster, and environmental hazard a variable subject to their authority. The endgame concludes not with a clash, but with a balance of unbound power. The universe itself bears the mark of their sovereignty. Hunters and humans must adapt or perish. Monsters follow patterns dictated by will. Dungeons no longer obey systemic logic, and the natural world subtly aligns with the influence of its new rulers. The solo-leveling universe has evolved into a domain where kings without systems define existence, a place where the only certainty is the presence and intent of those who refuse to be bound. The game is over, yet the consequences ripple endlessly. The solo-leveling universe is no longer predictable, no longer controlled, and no longer safe. It exists as a testament to absolute authority, a living chronicle of what occurs when rulers operate entirely beyond rules. Ainz Ooal Gown and Sung Jin-Woo remain at the pinnacle of sovereignty, and the world will never return to what it once was. In the end, the lesson is clear. Systems can fail, hierarchies can crumble, and power can be measured. But true sovereignty exists beyond constraint. The universe has been rewritten, and the rulers who stand above it have proven that to be unbound is to be absolute. That's the end of the game. Ainz Ooal Gown and Sung Jin-Woo have reshaped the solo-leveling universe, proving that true power lies not in levels, ranks, or systems, but in the ability to operate beyond them entirely. What would happen next in a world ruled by kings without systems? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a multiverse showdown like this.